So there's our couples line.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see my pointer as I do it?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So here's safety and attraction, roles, relational. So remember, most people are here,
Mm-hmm.
roles and relational,
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere in between these. This is a continuum. And notice on the roles, it's a reactive stage. How could it be anything else? It's not the ability to take subject and make it object that happens fully in first love. Is the relationship is still so reactive because all this energy hasn't found places in which to go, either individually or collectively.
Mm-hmm.
So when this couple reacts, notice what they do. Unfinished developmental issues arise in the present. So they can be working on a couple issue and their individual issues pop up. I'm forever saying to couples, when I'm doing parenting, I don't want to hear your individual issues pop up or your marital issues pop up when we're parenting. All we're doing is parenting because we don't get anything done. Everything just spirals down into all the issues going on at once. Plus, I want them aware of that, is that some of the emotional discipline is not being reactive to everything that flows through our cognitions at every second. It's what we say. It's centering out and being mindful of how we show up in every moment. But as we're saying, in intimacy, you want to find out how disciplined you are, go into the intimate relationship. So this couple tends to be incredibly reactive. To get back there real quick.
All right.
Another big one, they confuse merger with communion.
Yeah.
So merger anxiety is what the psychoanalytic literature talks about. When the opportunity to connect, the merger anxiety goes through the roof because there isn't enough sense of self. Remember, you have to have an ego before you can work to get rid of your egoic functions. Because otherwise, all you are is just reactive ball of plasma. I think the word that Wilbur uses for that in terms of it. But that happens an awful lot is if you're not fully separated, if you don't have your own, place in life, your own familiarity with your own state experiences, then the merger pops up immediately. So whereas us folks will commune with anyone. That's the beauty I love with the integral community. I mean, how can you not? I can feel everyone smiling from within at me across the divide. And how can you make it not? I mean, it's so fun to do this. I spend so much of my time alone. I'll commune with anyone for crying out loud. but not these couples that are lowest stage and whatnot. But do you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to really understand where it breaks down, because it lays down a directive for people, what you got to do to lay in there in order to do it. And I needed that couples line to order all of it. So before integral, I understood the complexity, but I had no slots for all of it, and certainly not as a developmental trajectory. And it was very, very confusing. And then when I worked in the lower left, which is the communal for people who aren't familiar, and then on the lower right, I never understood the amalgamation between those.
Sure.
Looked like you were going to say something, Mark.
No, I'm saying, yeah. What is the amalgamation? Stick with that a minute.
Well, I mean, in the lower left, remember, we have cultural expectations of what intimacy looks like, and I'm even contributing to them right now. But unless we have that lower right discipline of how are we going to do this level of vulnerability?
Mhm.
Are we going to take turns? Are we going to manage the regression? You know, have I established a pattern with you where I'm predictable and safe?
So that's the structure in which this is expressed.
The structure in which it's expressed.
Yeah.
So in San Diego Integral, I'm using the focal integral group discussions, and we're structuring that out like crazy as we learn. In intimacy, there's a paper I wrote that's in, come here, I have it later, I'll show you. But it's a 2014 paper, and I really detail out the lower right of how we do that. We should do that as a future podcast, in fact, because I've got a lot of work done there of how you take turns and handle the regression and give and take, because we really become aware of the need for the lower right in the simple fact of, and you've heard me say this before, when police officers, one of the most dangerous things police officers walk into is what?
Domestic violence scenes, yeah.
Right.
Disputes.
Because the regression into those lower areas of wounds, Abel Hendricks called them wounds. So if he feels unheard and injured at a very fundamental level, and he's full of rage, and an unsympathetic police officer walks into it in the form of an authority figure, we've got all the ingredients of something very ugly going on. And that's why is that regression, and I've really taken that word regression, and there's a lot of things like Jung used the word regression's not always pathological. And I know I'm getting into the weeds here. Psychoanalytic theory people appreciate it though. It can be in what Freud calls service of the ego.
Yeah.
So when Mark really regresses into his lower selves and you take care of him, Heidi, it really does give him the resources so that he can suck it in and deal with the real world as it is.
Thank you.
Right. It should be thankful. Thank you. So maybe we can do a podcast on that, because I've got a lot of good stuff on that I think people would find very useful.
Yeah, very nuts and boltsy. Yeah.
Yeah, lower right tends to be, but then again, that's where we learn how to do it. So we just made a reference to this. Is the wound is the most common entry point for intimacy? Now think about what I'm saying there. The wound is the most common point for intimacy. But what a terrible entry point.
Yeah, but it creates the sort of a connection. Or I remember one of my relationships that was really a connection point, because I thought I can help, when I listen and hear the other person talking about their wounds. And so it didn't work out, but it is easy to talk about the wounds and go into even reciprocally, friends, often friendships, friendships often are created on the wounds. They are talking about, this husband has done blah, 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 and mine had done blah, 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 and so they create the connection.
It can be a trap too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But it makes completely sense that this is an easy, very easy point to create a sort of connection. Maybe not the best one, but a sort of connection. Yeah.
Right. It really is. Remember, this couple doesn't have the discipline of the relational stage yet down.
Yeah.
And that's why it turns into chaos, because I almost get the sense that if they fight and they're both exhausted and they're participating, there's a level of reassurance they get out of it. And there are couples stuck at, if they don't fight, they don't have any intimacy.
Yeah, I know those too.
Yeah,
right. And then one of the common things we hear is some of those couples have great makeup sex, but geez, I don't want to have to go through all that to get there. I'm so grateful for Christine that she's got nice relational skills. If I screw up, I know I'm going to hear it at some point in the future. But I'm so grateful for the stability. I have energy for other things.
Mm-hmm. I knew a couple like this, and they were both academics, and you would think they are a little bit more smart or something. And we always said, why are they together when they only fight? But you know, we are now, I draw a line to what is happening now here in Italy. There were many, many, many fires led by people, because it's very obvious at the same time. So people, if they cannot get attention in a positive way, they can get attention in a negative way. And I think this is with couples the same thing. So if we don't love each other, so at least we fight. So at least we know that we are here, you know.
And we see that on the internet, on the chat boards all the time.
God, that's horrible. Yeah.
People that are starved for connection, and perhaps in their developmental history, they got a lot of negative, angry attention from their parents. That is their mode of connection, you know, which is kind of sad, but how it changes the tone. Do you remember in Hungary when Thomas Hubel said that pluralism and love are higher state experiences that have only a few hundred years of developmental history? Whereas fear and self-protection have been around for hundreds of thousands of years.
Before we were human.
Go ahead, Martin.
Before we were human, it was around.
Right. But it's so much easier to create that state experience. And Hubel went on to say, if leadership doesn't represent the higher states, then fear and self-protection will take over.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that over and over again. We're seeing politicians exploit that to create, you know, very low stage unity. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And so, if I can move on this, how are we doing with time, Heidi?
You can go on, and we can also, if we want, make separations in pieces. And we can also.
It's been over an hour now, but
yeah, it's okay.
Okay, so why don't I move up to first love to provide the contrast with the reactive role stage. And well, remember in the relational stage where they're structuring out their relationship and everything, you can read this okay, can't you?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I have it very little, but
let me make it a little bit bigger for you.
And you can send it to me, and I can post it in the website. Oh, yeah, that's better. Yeah, for sure.
So remember, regression done well. And here's that article, Journal Integral Therapy and Practice. And that's what I'm suggesting as a topic in 2014. It's all laid out there in terms of how do we create that container in the relationship that handles that well. This couple, they can get into a fight, they spat well, they quickly recover. They don't spend days on trying to make a point, whatnot. You can compartmentalize ruptures. That is so important. So even though Heidi might have been irritable this morning, you move on. Everything doesn't need to be talked about. If it does need to be talked about, you decide when you're going to talk about it, not before bedtime, not before you're visiting relatives, not before you go out to eat. You know, stay home, eat TV dinners if you're going to fight. Give and take works, problem solving works. So when you have that basis, now we can venture into the unity experience. Feel it. So look it up here. We expect shadow and unconscious to arrive, either my partner or me. And we're not blown away by it. We're beginning to go, whoa, I didn't even see that. Say more. I don't have to put it in context at this level. I'm expecting it. This is the developmental edge. This is the messy process, Salzman likes to say, of evolution. Certainly it's going to show up in intimacy. The transparency doesn't bother us here. We're used to it. In fact, we relish it. We're commune junkies. We want to connect. We accept there's going to be ruptures in connection. And the most we do is roll our eyes and move on. And I always tell people, don't get caught rolling your eyes, because you're going to. People are going to drop right back into, roll and lower state experiences. I do. I get irritable. That's what I love about my life. She just moves on. She does something sweet. Tom, is there anything I can do? And she's signaling me. We'll get through. And then I can move on. And when she does, I do the same thing. And, what are you going to do? It's part of living together, and, rather than spend all our time there.
We sort of do that too, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's why you guys flirt with first love. That's why I'm experimenting with you. Okay. I want to jump down to this one. We're open to the ownership of projection.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's really important. That's how we keep the table between us clean. And the way we do that, open to ownership, is we're humbled by the fact, and you've heard me say this before, in the very best relationships, the rate of projection is 50%. Everyone else approaches 100% projection.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Remember, they're not really seeing the other.
No, projecting my own onto you.
They approach that. So the idea of ownership of the projection means you say to the spouse, when you do this, it makes me feel this. Are you doing it because of this? Or is there another reason? Is it me, my projection of your reason, or is it you? Am I reading you correctly?
That's what we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe
not so worded, but I, at least me at the beginning, I did it all the time. And you begin to do that too, because he was not familiar with this sort of procedures which I had learned by coaching and counseling and so on, and looking into the patterns and into that. So I got it relatively clear. And so when we met, I don't know if I have told that already to you, he came with his things, with his manipulation things. And I said, what are you doing? Are you aware what you are doing? And then he had the choice. And at the beginning you did it. And then he said, oh, stop. Okay, tell me more. And then I could tell him what was happening. And I think this is the fundament of our relationship, that we both can say, stop a moment, and what is happening here really? And then we can talk about that. And you have realized how you were used to that, how you couldn't see it before, and now you can see it in yourself, in other people, and but first you need to have somebody who is
more
opening.
Fun to see it in other people.
Yeah, sure, that's more fun to see it in other people. But you need somebody first to open your eyes. And in this case, it was me and not a therapist, but it is very, 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 very useful. And he's beginning to do it with me too, and I'm very grateful for that, because he's more on the agreeable side and not touching the things, So you, in my opinion, can be a little more into that, You
would like more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it helps so much. Yeah. It cleans the table between us so much, because it isn't just slapped on the table, an object of focus all the time. That's the subject of focus all the time. And remember, this isn't first love. What potentially a shadow arises, and what potentially ends up being a source of distortion that's going to get projected, as we become more disciplined, as these lower right skills build, so you just articulated a lower right skill, Heidi, then what is potentially shadow and distortion becomes the very subtle energies later on that we're able to read deeper and deeper into things. See, we're just confusing the location. We're feeling into things and we're projecting it at that stage. Whereas when you get to the spiritual stage of love, they're well aware of that screen in front of them, and they're the cosmic tourists. They're going, whoa, did you see that? Yeah, I saw it too. Where's the location? And they're humming now because all these lower right structures are there. Whereas those of us are just flirting at this second tier first love, we got to slow down because all the feelings there, right? That challenges our ability. Whoa, was this me or you? Because I'm wounded at that moment oftentimes. And I feel exposed. And it's not all stable enough where I can use my thinking and feeling together. So it's kind of interesting watching that. So look at how we're talking about that right now. Now, you two are talking to each other, so you have a little more exposure than me. But me talking to you about it and talking to Christine adds an element of intensity that's totally different because it becomes a more state experience. And to try to think through all that energy becomes quite the challenge. So, do you like the direction this work is headed?
Yeah. Well, nothing else to do. Might as well. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about doing this. This is what I'm getting ready for the Inter-European Conference. I mean, it's coming through to me nice and clear as I do this. And there's so much more to do here, I'm realizing. And as I see that couple lattice unfold, it's really helped me understand the dynamic interplay that needs to go on, and then to structure in all those lower right things so that it's actually accessible to couples.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can create an online course or normal course on developing these skills, because I think it is really important, especially because green people and integral people, we are not so much into rules, and not so much into structures. So we really need to have some extra lesson, let's say, in that report.
A little touch of blue.
Yeah.
You bet.
So does this feel like a good place to wrap up?
Yeah, this is good.
So maybe in the future we can do the little more lower right work, because that seems to have some energy in it. And, we can stay aware of, how much we want these state experiences. But I'd be very curious if anyone wants to reach me. Can I give my email?
Sure. Absolutely.
So my email is easy. It's my name, Dr.Tom Habib. So no period after D, @gmail.com. And I would love feedback on this, because this is very much an evolutionary thing for me. I'm sure by the time Budapest comes along, and I highly recommend people attend the conference there. I know the three of us will be there, and there's going to be all kinds of luminaries there and whatnot. But by the time I get there, I hope to have this either further fleshed out and do more experiential experiences with this and whatnot.
Good. Yeah, so thank you very much. It was highly interesting. I really enjoyed it.
The time has flown. Yes.
And it's really something which I'm personally very much interested because I have participated and sort of analyzed afterwards all the relationships I had, and I find a lot of that described in what you are saying, and I completely agree with that. Also in the developmental line. So really, thank you, and for you.
Well, I two things. One is, I may not like it at the moment, but I always benefit from this kind of work. And two, it's also intellectually stimulating to me, and that's a plus also.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
good. Mm-hmm.